Welcome to this part of today's program. And we said especially warm welcome to Marie Silkeberg and Ghayath Almadhoun. And you two have written this marvelous book together. We must do some showing here. Till Damascus, a cooperative project for two poets and one world. It's a fantastic, it's a beautiful book with pictures and the words on the pages forming pictures as well. And you can recognize Marie's typical picture and Ghayath's. You write very differently. Your poetic language is very different. You come from different countries, culture, traditions, generations, not to mean gender, but in a marvelous way, your idioms work together and form something that is almost unique. It is, of course, it's full of anger and sorrow, war, violence, but also communication, something profound and important for poetry, bringing the words back through the realm of death. I mean, it's been important since the Gilgamesh and forwards, I would say. And I have enjoyed and been surprised by this work, both in this book and on the radio, where you did a hear play for the radio theater. It's still there, so you can hear it on P1 on the radio. Till Damascus. You just click for Till Damascus. It was released in 2015. And very short here, Marie Silkeberg was born in Copenhagen, and you live in Stockholm. You have been a professor in literary creative literature, creative writing in Gothenburg, and your latest book was from 2017, Atlantis. And Ghayath, you were born in Syria, and you have lived in Sweden for a couple of years, 10 years now. You have written several books too, and you have had great European success since you worked together. And I caught you the other day in Germany, where you were on a release tour for your new book translated into German. Yes. Now I give the word to you. How did it all start? How come you decided to write this long poem together, this book of poems together? You write in Arabic, Marie writes in Swedish. So you had to work in a third language. You had to work in English to just get a hold, an inkling of what you were writing about or thinking. How did it all start? Ghayath.
Mary, she really hates this question.
Yes, but we cannot avoid it.
Yeah. Mary, she is a really very deep intellectual person. I spent the first 3 years before we wrote this book together, or we decided to write this book together, discussing with her literature and world and everything. And I like her point of view towards the literature and the other question. In 2011, we signed a contract on the air. Like, you remember? Yeah, we signed contract on the air that we will work together and write a book. It's a crazy idea. It's never happened in history. It's never. No, I really mean it. There is no two different background language poets wrote book together, Arabic and Swedish. It's rarely to find it in the same language. Did you ever met Indian poet writing in Hindu, write a poetry book with a Spanish poet from Argentina? Never. Anyway, so it's a crazy idea, and it is poetic. It's very poetic. So, and we took the risk, and Mary was really patient, because this book, to appear in this shape, we should cut the work between me and Mary, and it's automatically will be 95% on Mary and 5% on me, because in the end, this is a Swedish book. The person who could read it is Mary, who could check the mistakes is Mary. It's the publisher house, it's related to me. So it was really, I felt, and I all my life tried to be a feminist, but in this project, it will not work to be like this. So it was a really hard job, and I know how much is suffer the people to write a book alone. So it's not double suffering, it's 10 times more. So it was a really difficult job, but we really, if I speak from my perspective, I really enjoy it, because the process of it was cooking. We were cook, fight, cancel the project, and then go back and say we have a contract on the air. Go back, cooking again, fighting, discussing, and it takes 3 years. And we go through the translation word by word. I make the first verse into English, then we go through it to Swedish. It's have a lot of joy to work on this way, and I think it is the most beautiful things I did in my life. And Mary, she could understand the book more than me. It's very beautiful book in the how it's look, but this is so tricky because it's very dark from inside. And it's still, for me, it's took me to another direction in the way I write, and I think, in the way I judge the thing. And even if last things, even if it's not people in Sweden in general, they don't like to give credit for anything. Yeah, you know more than me. It's opened the door for something. At least now we have 10 books for writers written together. It's began after us immediately, I think, Athena and her friend from Romania, and now we have a lot. So we really open a door, even if no one will say that. Oh, Mary, we have begun that, but like one day they will.
I've understood that you worked very hard, both of you, for almost 3 years. What did you learn most from the project, Marie?
It's hard to say what I learned most. And it's like, I feel that it's also what changed me. I'm maybe still relating to what that process meant because it was like Ghayath said, we signed it in the air, and this air was more like definite for him than for me. I was just, maybe we can do it, I don't know. And let's just try. But I would, if I had known how hard it would be, where it would take me, I would not have done it, I'm sure. But it was also like a time when we met. Ghayath had just came to Sweden and we worked. But when we started to do this book, this signature, it's, yeah, we all know what happened, started in Syria. And that is so much connected, so it's a very special time we were writing it. So it was also a very strong necessity to do it. Also to translate Ghayath's poetry to Swedish. Also to have all this like experience, so many more and more Syrians coming to Sweden. And also just Arabic speaking people living in Sweden. I really wanted it to come closer to Swedish culture and literature. And when you like want to do something, you also find how like the differences can become bigger and bigger. Somehow you try to make it closer to you and you see that the difference, it's enormous. And this gap, you can say also between Swedish everyday life and being like, I met not only Ghayath, but also his Syrian friends, also people coming from Europe, coming to his home, and the gap from what they experienced, but watching what was going on in Syria, it was like and it's still, it's like it has also left me with a big sadness about also the European silence, indifference, or at least nothing changed. And it's like when you do something like this, you still hope for a change. You want some change to happen, and when it doesn't happen, it's very hard afterwards.
You told me that it was a queer, strange feeling that when you started writing the book, the war was at a beginning, or rather it was the Arabic Spring, and then the war started, but sort of history wrote the book for you, and it became almost darker than the project was from the beginning. Would you comment on that? History maybe is the third co-writer of this book.
Sure. I think the first series of poems, which is mine, it's the last poem in that. It starts with, "Now the killing will start," he says, about the veto. And that is the Russian veto against, like, and that is like, when I think about this line, like, "Now the killing will start," and it has been going on, it's like, it's so hard to just think about that. And that is like, I wrote these poems, like, also in a dialogue with Ghayath and his friends, like taking a lot of voices inside my poetry, and just also feeling that I should write it down, because this is a very special time, because what became war was revolution in the beginning. It could have like ended somewhere else. So it was like a feeling of something is very, very big is happening. And so I felt that I should write it down as it happened. But with all I knew about poetry and about life and everything, but it's like it just somehow felt that it went out of my hands and history took over the writing in many ways, which I felt like Ghayath's poem ends the book. I couldn't stop. There's no final line for me.
Could you comment on this issue too?
I really believe that poetry is the reflection of our deep memories and experience and sicknesses and everything inside us. And as always, I say it's a reflection in a broken mirror. So we can, as I see poetry and as I read the history of literature, I can separate your experience as a writer and memory from your text. What I like in Marie's way, and because that I was longing for working with her, that really she took the juice of the life around her, and then it's appear in her text in a way, in a very literary way. And we didn't arrive to that because the Arabic literature took a really different direction than European literature. The Samic and the Germanic languages, they have two different directions. The postmodern began in the Arabic country in the 7th century with Abu Nawas. So we have really different, like the postmodern began 1,200 years ago. So it's a really different direction. It's a different history of literature. So that road we took in the Arabic literature, it didn't take us to this kind of poems. It's not exist in the Arabic country where you deal with the life itself, and it's appear with, like you can see a line in from a discussion in a poem in English or in Swedish or in Danish or So this kind of writing, it's opened my mind to things, and by this way, I began to inherit something when I am alive. And because you say in the first question, when it's not a question, it's when you say it's too different. If it was similar, no need to write book together. Then they can read the poems of Mary, and that's it. And we are similar, it's okay. But the differences is arrive us to similarity, because we, I don't want to say it in a simple way that we complete each other, no. But the differences, it's make it similar and connected to each other. And from that sense, I always see that the things I learn from this experience, it's much more, and I really mean it, it's much more than being in the exile for 60 years. You understand me? Because I witnesses something from inside the inside. As if you are looking to people playing cards and everyone looking to his cards. But I was looking to the four people and I saw everyone what he have. And at the same time, I'm not part of this place. I'm not playing because I'm not part of the Swedish society. And in a moment, I became not part of the Syrian anymore because the distances and the time and the project. So I became in this parallel life. And from that moment, the differences between this book, the third, and the fourth in my Arabic writing, it's really huge. So it's from that moment, from the moment I wrote the poem, the details for this book, and everything switched. So I can't describe the things really. If the time repeat itself, I don't know how it will be. The book will be different cover or something.
I have a very simple question. You mentioned that postmodernism in Arabic literature started something like 1,200 years ago. And of course, the Arabic language is also a movement of thousands and thousands of years, containing legends, poetry, astronomy, you name it, and words, not to mention words. It's rich in vocabulary, while Swedish is one of the smallest Germanic languages up north, living in a freezer for ages, being a sigh of the woods mouse or a scream of a lonely fox somewhere, but not very cultural, actually. So which was your first impression of the Swedish language? What did it, after all, you're now working with a little Danish too. Marie is also half Swede, half Danish, and a little Ukrainian drop somewhere. Her grandfather is from Odessa. A Jew, is he Jewish? We never know, of course. Of course he is, or not. I don't know. But Odessa is also a very special town in the history of literature. It has nourished some of the best writers in Russian, for example, Isaac Babel, not to forget. But let's not talk about that now. Let's talk about how did you first experience the Swedish language?
I really read most of the Swedish poetry before I came here, at least the famous writers, because they are translated into Arabic. But as I see the Swedish poetry right now, and as a foreigner and outsider, I think the Swedish poetry is really great. I can't deny that. I compare it with many European poetry, and it's really great, and it's have really great reputation, especially translated to English in America and like this. It's have a very strong scene.
Which quotes did you read? Did you read Ekelöf and Tranströmer?
Yeah, of course. Of course, yeah. And I met Thomas Tranströmer once in Damascus, 2006. He was with Adonis and like this. And I read the classics, and then Jasim Muhammad and Ibrahim Abdul Malik, they make this huge anthology, and Sardawi, he translated a lot and like this. And the good in the Arabic country that we have 22 Arabic countries, so people could translate you in Morocco, and you don't know about these books, and then you find them by chance, Baghdad and Damascus and Beirut and like this. So.
Do you read Marie?
Yeah, of course. I read her in the anthology before we worked together. Yeah, of course. And I translated 2 texts for her, working with her into Arabic. No, the Swedish poetry itself, no, it's really, really like catching you, because it is the inner language, the silent and the tricky, and violence in silence, and all this smooth, what we call it, Tiger of Sverige, silent of Sweden. And it's really, really very, as I see it, maybe I'm wrong, but I saw the Swedish poetry very aggressive under the service, and it's like this, but in a lagom, yentalagin way, everything is good. But it's not true. It's really shining. As we say in Arabic, the al-jamr taht al-ramad, yeah, it's the wooden under the ash. So it's you saw a white ash of yeah, but when you dig in it, you find the red wood. So yeah, compared with many European poetry, it's have a very good reputation. But my relation with the poetry of Mary, it's not related to languages or countries or history of literature. It's really personal relation. This is where 2 poets met in a world. Doesn't matter the background. It's about the discussion of literature and the way you see the world. We discuss, we fight, we agree, and then she go to her home, I go back to my home, and everyone wrote his text. So
what do you fight about?
Mary, you are professional.
Everything, Ulrika.
Give example, like.
Suddenly we can just fight. We can fight for hours. But we can speak about that, and it's interesting a lot because it's like it repeats itself a lot. Because it's like also when you work together, you really have to fight, because it's too much to have someone so close to you and entering some inner space that you didn't open up for anybody else. So it's like you really have to fight a lot, and we can do it until we fall down dead. It's really like it can go on for hours. But I want to say something else about relating to Arabic literature and tradition, because also we didn't only fight. Ghayath was telling me a lot. Like I was working very much at that time teaching, so I could come back to Stockholm, and he was speaking about the Quran, about Arabic history, about a lot of things, and I was very tight and listening, and the wonderful stories. And then I suddenly could say, when did that happen? And then he could say, like, yeah, some 100 years ago. And I said, when did that happen? Again, because I really want to know, like, where am I in history? And then this feeling of time being so enormous in, like, Arabic tradition and thinking, like, which, like, Swedish literary tradition is like some 100 years. It is so strange to relate to a culture that is so huge. And not only like that it has this memory of time and feeling time being such an ocean, but also the layers in the language from like very old words and very modern, which we had to work with and try to translate that into Swedish where we cannot even think. It is like we cannot think like beyond 500 years.
But that's in shortly that because any language became changing with the time, but what's happened that the Quran came in Arabic and the people want to pray and they decided to not change the language, so the language kept it the same and the same. So I can wake up in the morning and I read poem from 1,600 years as if I read modern text. This has happened by chance by the Quran, and I really know the Quran somehow by heart because I'm a poet and I raised as a Muslim. Ooh. Yeah. So. Yeah, the Quran is the text that where you can find the Arabic language in a pure way, and because that the language is same, so it's really problematic when you can read the text from 800 years and you think it's written today in Aftonbladet evening magazine, and you don't know that this is written in that time. So it's really problematic, and it's good. I prefer the Swedish version of, like, you can check the last 300 years and that's it, and not go and fight with your friend for something written 2,000 years ago. Like, it's really problematic. I don't know.
I think we rather envy you being able to talk to Rumi or whoever in that way as your contemporary. That's fantastic. We can't even read our 18th century writers because they couldn't agree on interpunctuation or anything. They're quite funny, actually. But it's a good try, though. It's a good try, and this is not my table, but I will try it anyhow. I've understood that Arabic poetry of today has much more of imagery and metaphors than, for example, in contemporary Swedish poetry. As a postmodernist, we wouldn't mind, would we? But what does this mean in working together?
I think that I was very fascinated by Ghayath's way of thinking in images, metaphors. That was like one ongoing discussion, like our critique of the metaphor, which has been going on in Swedish poetry for like a long time. And I had to try to explain that for Ghayath, and he was like, and sometimes he could say to me, but that was a metaphor. When I said, yeah, and when I said I'm against metaphors, but we were like, but that was, I also found out, because we were also working with films, that it was not only like he was thinking in metaphors or images, which I do not. My relation to poetry is much more through sound. It's really deeply into sound, I think. Sometimes the images comes from that, but it was really, there's also some, and also in the beginning when we met, we went to an exhibition, the big, with Turner and Monet and Twombly. And like this, and I also just experienced that how he perceived these images was so direct in a way that I came another. So I was very fascinated by this. And you know, at least some Swedish people here in the audience know that we speak about all other traditions, that they have a flower language, flowery. It's very bad, but it's like thinking that this very dry language that we have in Sweden is the best. And everything else is very like strange, but there is so much like experience, everything that you can deal with in images that I was very, very fascinated by while working.
This is so interesting. It is the same struggle with modernism. That in the arts, in architecture, in social planning, that if poets criticize each other's flowery images because flowers, ornaments, decorations should just get out with Le Corbusier and the others. I mean, this is... I didn't think of it, but it's horrifying. It's some sort of authoritarian grip to get rid of the flowers. In a way, we must get them back, and this is a tricky one in a part of the world where modernism has its hold on the thinking. And it's quite tricky to translate it.
Yeah, but we should get it back, but we could just like relate to our fellow citizens, so many here now in our countries, here in Europe, which are from other cultures, writing, using, thinking. Like and that is like our society now. It's not like... And I think that we could just do it.
Yes, but the artists have a job to do here, to think outside. I will not say the box, but I mean it. Actually, how is your relation to modernism in that sense?
Yeah, I said before that Arabic literature is fighting in another battle, but there is of course, there is a lot of in common, but for example, the metaphor itself in English, it is three kind of metaphor in Arabic. So when they say metaphor, it's for us as Arabs, it means three things: kinaya, isti'ara, tashbih. And the isti'ara, it's two kind, makniya and sariha. So we have four kind of metaphor. One of them I am really against. It is the isti'ara makniya, when you say the sound of the key. That I'm really against. Or the key sound. You make the key as a human and he have a sound. That I am really against, the isti'ara. But there is two things I am not against. When you say, I eat you. I really mean it. When I say to a woman, I eat you, I mean that I eat her without trying to make it metaphor. I'm not going inside this, but I'm going inside that why the metaphor is strong in the dictatorship and began to disappear in every democratic country. This is the real question for me. People during the history use the symbols and the metaphors to hide from the censorship of religion and politics and like this. And we have examples of many poets and writers in the Arabic country got killed after the king discovered their metaphors. Like in Kalila of Dumna, you know, his story is the first short story in the history, and I think, and when the king understand the subjects of because he make the stories in the names of animals. So the lion is the king, and the king kill him. So during our history, every time that discovered the meaning of the metaphor, the person was paying his life. So metaphor is related to dictatorship. And after the Syrian revolution, I really began to limit my using of metaphors because I prefer to say the things in a direct way. Sometimes it's not poetic in the Arabic way. It could be poetic in the Swedish way, not in the French way. For example, it's different when we say West, but it take me to another level. So the discussion, one of the fights between us, it was about the metaphor itself, how you say it, and what is best to say what you want to say. So it's a really complicated subject, and one of the rare country in the world that they think that metaphor is patriarchy is Sweden. I don't met any people, maybe some in Norway, yeah. I met person in Norway and maybe one in Denmark. But outside these three countries, I never met a person, he say for me, metaphor is part of patriarchy outside this country. So it's a really different subject. I can't go deep and dig in it because I'm not expert of the history of the Swedish literature.
Marie, why is it like this? I mean, in the 70s, Thomas Tranströmer was accused of the master of metaphors, was sort of, he was criticized or shaken, a little bit shaken. Why was that, as you see it professionally? It's your own fault. You started this with metaphors.
But I think we can just stay in this subject because it's what to say things straight. We had that discussion, Ghayath and me, and we also had it around like to like, because he also come from like he's also Palestinian, and I will not be caught into this like being one political theme poet and I was just insisting on write what's going on, and it was like, and he said I am like will stick inside the metaphor. So it's like that there is some kind of battle between the metaphor, like hiding meaning and and making like it open to anyone who can interpret it, and trying to say things in another like more direct way. And because what's happening in the 70s, it's long, and we have been discussing it a long time. But it's like, I think that there's like, and also this with like witness, to be a witness, or like it has to do with, and when things are happening very fast, you have to, yeah, you know, there was a lot of like protest singers, people speaking. It was important for things to be said. And then when also if you are writing metaphors under dictatorship, but when you want to tear the dictatorship down, you cannot continue write metaphors.
I would suggest that because this was a beautiful start of a conversation. So could you please read? You can read something with a metaphor in it, the graves. And Marie, you can read something without metaphors. So we will have a sample of each. 1.5 minutes each, because we did start a little late. With the graves.
Yes, I will read the mass grave for my friend who got killed by Assad. And the day they find his body, it was for me that they find a mass grave, because he was a really great man. He was not one person, he was a lot. He was a nation. And I say, when they find you, they find a mass grave, genocide. And when they put you in the grave, they put you in a mass grave. I hope I will find it. It's very short. I don't think I need it. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Two lines. عندما قتلوك ارتكبوا إبادة جماعية لرجل واحد. عندما وجدوا الناس جثتك وجدوا مقبرة جماعية لجثة واحدة.
Kände traumat, våldet, utan bedövning, smärtan. Vad man viskar i natten, till vem? What is this, kylan, I'm really? Innefattad i deras natt, bristen på. Nomadic tenderness, nomadisk, stöter ifrån sig något flyktigt och eldfängt. Omkastningarna, att öppna sig för. Som om våldet trängt in eller flyttat in i kroppen, andningsvägarna. Att andas inne i virveln, snön, flamman, den mänskliga skillnaden, dödligheten, lungornas konturer. Spectacular. En kvalitet av förträngning som gått för djupt. Normal, I want it to be normal. Reaktionerna, ställningstagandena, spontana protester, aktioner. Såg på dem, på snön som låg över parken, träden, mörkret och ljuset, gatlyktorna. So many pictures. Lyssnade på språket, vad jag förstod. Bar telefonen genom natten från känslan.